Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Sarah, is it okay if I kick things off and then? Okay. Um, our aim today is pretty straightforward and not limited, but we hope that we're going to just follow up on last week's conversation. This is about how we can gather ideas and contribute to the exciting opportunity we have to spend roughly $1 billion that the feds have handed us. We won't fence it off all for climate priorities, but certainly a lot of people are looking in that direction. And so we want to help. We have Representative Hooper, Chair Hooper, with us, and I thought we'd start by just getting any updates in terms of timing, process, et cetera, from her, and then want to come back to the discussion we had last week and tell you what Sarah and I were thinking made sense and then we would tweak our sort of path forward. So let's start with Mary. Mary, nice to see you. Glad they let you out of the appropriations room. I suppose you let yourself out.
No way.
So tell us, as I understand it from the Senate side, the House earmarked or fenced off a significant chunk of the ARPA money, broadly speaking, for families and things like that. Some of that could be climate. I'm sensitive that there are committees of jurisdiction and there are the appropriations committees, and we don't need to step on people's toes, but we have interests in some expertise and knowledge in this group. And, there's a balance. People are overworked, right? So could we contribute? So tell us, first of all, does that make any sense from your point of view? And then what do you understand to be the timing of bills moving? We know this money isn't got to all be spent by December. So when we look to the triple aims of these dollars hitting several goals, do we have to figure all of that out by mid-May, or can we do some of it to contribute between now and December? Just those kinds of basics.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. And it's really nice that I get to be back with you all. I realize I haven't come once this year, the serious downside of being in appropriations. So the plan is that the federal dollars will be appropriated. So we will run these monies through bills. We did, as you noted, fence off some money to kind of we said $250 million would be for communities, families, small businesses, and used words like resiliency and some other what were hopefully kind of signs saying, look at this from a climate standpoint. At least that's the way my thoughts had been. But none of that money is appropriated. It is just kind of a fencing there. So the plan is that we will use the budget bills, those being obviously the big bill, there's the appropriations bill, and broadband. All of those bills are over in the Senate. So much of the work needs to happen on the Senate side in terms of their response, but obviously then it'll come back to us and we'll have that conversation. So I can't comment on what goes on your side, Chris, but what I am hoping we will do on our side is hear from committees of jurisdiction about areas where we ought to be making additional investments or how to set it up for next year in terms of being ready then to appropriate money. um, as I said, the plan is to run it through budgets, that we will adjourn in May and then come back in, the normal course of time. There is also, as folks know, we're anticipating more federal money coming down and trying to understand how that can be worked in the process. And again, our view is that as much as possible needs to be appropriated rather than run through the kind of off-session joint fiscal committee process, which was necessary last year, just given the construct of those dollars. But that construct doesn't exist this year with these dollars. So hopefully we won't have to use that process. So as you all know, the governor kind of laid out some of his criteria and fencing thoughts, just as we did. And there is a lot of similarity in some places, broadband, and he did a nod to climate, talked a lot about water and sewer, which we tried to do a nod toward. An area that I think that I would love to see some attention to is what he's proposing, what, $143 million over time in so-called economic recovery. And he's proposed $50 million for FY22 to just go out, as he has been proposing all along, to just go out to businesses. I would suggest that we don't have enough money to make everybody whole from their losses, so that we should be instead very strategic and targeted in terms of where we are applying funds like that. And I think that's an interesting area where we don't tend to think sometimes, which is, what are the future economic opportunities for the state around climate related issues? So I just, let's be investing in sustainable agriculture, and what do we need to do to build systems that will help us there, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm feeling that may be an area where we have a lot of silence on, and it may be an opportunity to move into.
Okay, Mary, thank you. Carrie, Representative Dolan, I see you have your hand up. I want us to get moving because I have a feeling that some of your questions will be answered, but I don't know, because I don't know what your question is. So do you have like a quick question for Mary, or are you just wanting to be part of the broader conversation? Because we want everyone to be part of the broader conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to hold on my question. It was in regards to the type of water investments we need to be able to support downtown smart growth. That's climate. That's a pro-climate type of strategy. So I'm happy to hold if that's the best, if you prefer.
Yeah, I do prefer.
I can follow up later.
But it echoes some of my thinking. So first of all, Mary, thank you. That's really helpful. A quick question. Do we have any sense? I mean, this money is crudely $1 billion over that we can spend in the course of 3 years. What has anybody directed you, or do we have a sense yet if we're going to spend a third of it this year, or if we mean to, before we adjourn in May, have half of it underway? Any guidelines like that you can help us think it through?
Well, the governor had a proposal. Interestingly, he criticized us for spending so much money, and then he proposed spending more money than we did in 22. He's laid out this in roughly thirds, third 22, third 23, et cetera. We spent about 300 actually allocated for expenditures about 350 or 50 million that will roll out over a couple of years. But we have the time is the particular point here to do careful, thoughtful planning. I'm just concerned about the pressure we're going to get to spend money early on particular proposals.
Okay. And then I'll ask for everybody, but maybe Mary, you take your first crack at it. Kind of Carrie's question is very similar to mine, which is a lot of the stuff we'd like to see invested in is in fact sort of infrastructure. Stormwater, water treatment is a very clear example. And we, how do we believe that will be specifically called out and allocated money from the feds in an upcoming bill. So we don't want to like not take advantage of those investments if we didn't have the second bill. But on the other hand, we don't want to blow it on infrastructure and then, you know, not be able to take advantage of the federal money. Any suggestions for us there?
Yes. And my biggest thought is we need to get ready for whatever is coming. So what steps do we need to make today to be prepared for the potential of particularly the infrastructure bill? So do the smart thinking now. So when we know what those monies are, we're ready to go and to apply them well. We tried to do a wee bit of that in the budget when we were messing with the Clean Water Fund and we put 100 million into the Clean Water Fund. We're pulling some money out for other reasons that I'll be happy to explain some other time. But we also gave DEC, we refilled 3 positions in DEC. The thinking being they need staff to do this work. And similarly, you know, what should we be doing in these other areas to build capacity so that when the money is available and we have good ideas, we're ready to go. I've seen that with the CRF money, what we've done the past year. We were spectacularly successful with VHCB and their partnership because they were ready to go. So how do we get ready to go in other areas?
Okay. So thank you. This is a wonderful overview and helped me a lot. Excuse me while I finish my lunch. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah and want to bring everybody into the discussion. Last week, we had a brainstorm of what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? You all tossed out about 10 kind of categories that I tried to jot down and make sense of. And what Sarah and I have tried to do here is to just kind of like what Mary was saying, identify some of the gaps that are really obvious that would be a shame for us not to take advantage of. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, but I'll give you an example. You will not see, and the concept is some working groups, you will not see transportation. And that's not because transportation's not important in the climate movement. It is the most important. But we have 2 committees dedicated only to that. You all who are on those committees have been doing great work. We have the foundation. It just didn't seem like, you know, if we have ideas there, we know who to bring them to immediately. We don't need a working group that is going to put in extra time on top of everything for transportation. Similarly on energy, we kind of left that out. So with that, that's the tee up, and I will hand it over to Sarah because I'm sick of listening to my own voice, and I'm sure you are too. Sarah.
And you want to go take another bite of your lunch, which is perfectly legitimate. So in listening to folks coming with ideas last week for areas that we want to focus on and want to be able to give help to the policy committees and imagine how we break down barriers, you know, to making progress out in our communities. We identified, you know, municipal and school infrastructure as one place where we might be able to give some help and do some work. Those things that Carrie was just talking about with respect to, sewer and water systems in order to allow for, downtown development. That's a big area of need in our state. And I think we also have had a number of conversations about the state of our school buildings. And so I think a working group that would spend a little bit of time on that would be a great idea. We also talked about the need for workforce development. It was a large sort of focus and perhaps unmet challenge from the working group that Scott Campbell led in 2019. And has plenty of opportunity for progress there. This is one of those really easy triple wins where we're getting workforce training out there. We're helping businesses find employees and workers find jobs, and we're also able to focus that on those jobs that help Vermonters save money on their heating and transportation. We need to have also, I think, some focus on food systems. And I think you could perhaps even broaden that a bit to, to focus on healthy soils as well as, local food systems. So those are sort of the three policy areas to focus, and then woven in throughout all of that, plus the transportation work that we're doing. I think it would be helpful for us to have an equity group, just really focused on making sure that in everything we do, we are, as a caucus, expressing our desire to reduce inequities between different types of people, between different geographic areas, between people of different economic situations. And so I think we would like the equity focus group to really bounce around between all of the other work that we're doing. And we didn't go so far last week as to sort of have people volunteer to be a part of one of those 4 working groups. And so I think for our last act of the day today, I'd like to try to see folks step up and say, I want to work on, and then we can allow those groups to sort of form as people gravitate towards things that they're interested in working on. And we, as the Climate Caucus leadership team, will figure out how we disperse to help and support and be liaison. Does that sound like a good plan, Chris?
Well, yes, only because that was the plan we talked about. But my opinion is second to making sure everybody else thinks that this is roughly the right approach. There's a lot of wiggle room in there. A lot of that is penciled in. But the concept of these 4 groups picking up on areas that are deeply related to climate, but potentially missing in the natural flow, or not as much of an emphasis in the natural flow of the legislature. So does that make sense? And before you answer that, and I see Selena, you have a question. I think, and Mary, I'd be curious on your input. I think we need to have ideas that we can bring forward like within the next 2 weeks. And that's ambitious. It means that it's not going to be fully baked ideas. And it means people are going to have to work some evenings and really make these working groups meaningful. But anyway, so there's the presentation. What do people think? It always looks like Becca White has a question, but it's just her picture. Selena, let's take it to you.
Yeah, my question is actually just, Sarah, could you say again, for those of us like me who might have been in a little bit of a multitasking mode, unfortunately, during this meeting, just at a really just a couple of words, what the 4 working groups are, and I'll type them in the chat so people can just kind of see it.
Great, yes. Food systems and healthy soils. workforce development, municipal and school infrastructure, and equity pervading all. And I suppose you could put transportation down because we want the equity crew to also be watching what's going on in the transportation realm and making making an impact on that. But we feel like we don't need a working group on transportation since you guys are all rocking it.
Mary Hooper.
Sorry, had myself muted. To the question of, do we need to get something soon? I would say that there is an opportunity that we ought to take advantage of. And so, yes, if there are discrete, finite, targeted opportunities, yes, let's try to figure out how to do that. And then back to my earlier point about getting ready. We've talked about the federal money that's coming to the state. There is also a huge amount of money that is going to municipalities and school districts. And some of us have a concern, particularly about school districts, about their capacity to be thinking about how to use these funds in the best way. And now turn your climate hat on and think about whether or not they're going to be focusing there. So we need to do something. And AOE says, no, we don't want any help. They know what to do. Leave us alone.
So I have an answer or a comment about that. But I want to hear from other people too. But I almost wonder if that working group, that's not going to really be legislation, but it could be a great opportunity for us to engage with local energy committees. So I could see us coming up with some ideas. I mean, if you imagine, here we are, we're not a full-time legislature, but it feels like it these days, and we are full-time when we're embroiled in this. You've got select boards who are suddenly going to have cash on hand. Maybe if we do a good job, the town energy committee goes and is part of the first draft, right? That would be really impressive. Now, maybe they can do that without us, but maybe it's as simple as send a letter to all the town energy committees. And that sort of, the school boards are going to say, yeah, thanks, Montpelier, take a hike. But I do think that we could contribute there. Again, we're not trying to be bossy. We're trying to contribute. Anyway, Carrie, why don't we turn to you?
Just a question. I'm a bit confused about the school infrastructure piece. I know that there's a whole task force or bill looking at funding, and weatherization is critical part of that. I also know in terms of what Mary had talked about in terms of getting ready, the water and wastewater infrastructure piece is a critical piece. So I just flagged that because they both seem to be important, but very different.
Yep. Okay, Molly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sort of thinking about whether we need a transportation working group or not, just to go back, the reason that H94 came about and we got it out before the agency's proposal for transportation was that, a group of us from the Transportation Committee, a couple of whom are here now, we worked together to develop some concepts that we wanted to present, and then we got 70 co-sponsors. So in a way, it wasn't, then it came to the Transportation Committee, but it was developed, the ideas were developed beforehand. And I think it was a really, really important process. And also, I think that in terms of transportation, we need to think about what's going on with the Transportation Climate Initiative. Is that going to happen? And also what's happening in terms of the Climate Council, and how do we align with all that stuff? So I would, like to, work with our group on the transportation committee that started out with H94 and also work with the Senate and sort of collaborators and, present some ideas from there.
Great. Thank you, Molly. We love to hear that. Let's go to Carol and then Gabrielle, then Scott, and then we need to get to work here, Sarah. Let's go to Carol.
Well, here's what's been on my mind. With broadband out to the last mile and with Act 250 and trying to maintain our forest blocks and our wildlife corridors, I am thinking that we need to consider where we are putting that last mile of broadband. We should probably not be putting it up a 899-foot driveway. This is just me talking. And my concern is that we will, by decisions we make about broadband and where it goes, will impact land use planning and could negatively impact our desire to keep some land in intact forest blocks. And I'm wondering how those two things interact. That's what I want to say. That's it. Thank you very much for saying.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Big question. Scott, we'll turn to you.
Thanks. What Molly referenced about the Climate Council seems like a really important point too. We ought to be closely observing what they're doing and not and amplifying what they're doing, not replicating it, not whatever. But that seems like a really important piece, and I don't know how we do that, but just want to emphasize it again.
Yep. That can be hard to stay on top of, but okay. And Gabrielle, we can't see you, but we see that your hand is up.
And we can't hear you.
You're muted. I wonder if I can unmute you. Nope. Okay.
While we're waiting, Gabrielle, go ahead and jump in if you get yourself unmuted and want to, but I think it would be really helpful for us to try to designate at least who wants to be the center of gravity for each of these working groups, and then you all can arm wrestle amongst yourselves for who gets to chair it. Gabrielle, go right ahead.
Thanks. I know we don't want to overlap
Gabrielle, is it possible that you
It's like massive.
get out of
Gabrielle,
the wind for a
I
moment?
muted you because it's very windy where you are and we can't hear a word.
Let's
maybe,
get to shelter there and unmute yourself again. In the meantime, I'll just jump back in and say we've got the potential for 4 working groups and would love to see volunteers. Unmute yourself and jump in if you want to be the center of gravity for a working group. Selena.
I don't know if I'm volunteering to be the center of gravity exactly. If somebody else is eager to do it, that would be fantastic. But also happy to play my part. But I'm definitely interested in the municipal school.
Excellent.
Seeing how I can. Oh, Mari too. Nice.
Thank you. All right, the 2 of you can rock that right out. All right, Chris, you can call on people if you want to. I'm going to keep track of who's doing what.
okay. Leslie?
I'm interested in the municipal issue too, so happy to work with you guys. I don't know what's center of gravity, but I love collaboration, so let's figure it out.
Okay.
Super.
Well, Gabrielle, Are you?
I think I'm here. Is this
you're in a
any better?
protected environment?
much
Go
better.
ahead.
Okay, great. I apologize. One thought, the comment was made that other municipalities are getting funding, et cetera. I know we have 4 working groups. I would suggest that maybe Lucky, you, Chris, and Sarah as leadership. I think there should be coordination with like the Rural Development Working Group. Is having every Thursday morning 8 a.m. meetings on exactly what to do with these funds. So I think if we don't have a coordination committee per se, we really need to make sure that we're kind of coordinating those efforts. And I'm happy to support the working group, the working workforce. And I'm happy to be a resource for the school group because I did write the Clean Energy Finance Report, which talked a lot about how to help municipalities fund clean energy projects, and that was from 2018. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great. And following the chat, I'm seeing other people saying that they want to be in certain groups, but not necessarily the center of gravity to call the first meeting. Who else has their hand up?
Carrie, did we hear from you, or is that an old hand?
Oh, yeah. No, happy to help out on the municipal part. I don't know much about the school piece, but as you know, I have my specialties in water, so happy to help on the water infrastructure component of that.
Okay. Scott?
Yeah, well, I'm interested in workforce development. I'm not in the education world really. So I really want somebody to help with that. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of pieces to it.
There's a lot of pieces to all of this.
A lot of pieces to all of it. Yes.
Yeah, tech centers and higher ed. Anybody want to team up with Scott to try to put some energy around that?
Well, Gabrielle did volunteer in that one, I think. Right.
Well, I was wondering whether she was volunteering on that or school projects, projects on schools.
Right.
She volunteered for both, I think.
Oh, okay.
Like she volunteered for, well, I'm taking notes on who volunteered for what, so we can
Okay.
after you later. And
I think
I
maybe-
have that Gabrielle volunteered for workforce development and to be a resource for municipal and stuff.
Oh, okay, great. All right. That's perfect.
By the way, Heather Supernaut had told me last week that she was interested in food systems, so put her on the list. Mari, you have a question? Or is that an
No,
old-
I was just going to pick up from what you just said. There's only 23 of us in this meeting right now, and there are other folks that would very likely want to and be perfect for some of these groups. So thanks for mentioning Heather.
Yeah, I think the goal here is to, as quickly as we can, identify somebody who's willing to be the person who calls the first meeting, and then we can get that information out to the whole climate caucus so that people can gravitate to the group that they want to work with. And so Selena's taking notes. I don't have somebody volunteering to be the center of gravity for food systems. Anybody wanted to call that first meeting and try to drum up enough energy to get that group together?
I could do it if there's nobody else in my free time. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Great.
Nobody bump me out of that.
John
What about
Bartholomew wants
equity?
to be in that group, I see, but he doesn't want to be the center of gravity.
Yep, got that.
Tanya Vihovsky and Michelle Boslin want to work on equity. Great.
Yeah, we need somebody to agree to convene the equity one, and then Avram.
Yeah, I was just had my hand up. I would be interested in the food systems one, but not the center of gravity at this point.
Got it. Okay. So we need a convener for the equity, and then we can that will be at least enough to get us on paper started.
See
Tanya?
Yeah,
Chris,
Tanya,
I'm
your hand
happy
raised.
to convene the group. I just don't want to be an ongoing leader in the group. I don't think I have that capacity, but I'm happy to be the person that people touch base with about scheduling.
Super.
Perfect. We got her on the hook. Do you see that? Perfect.
Step one.
Okay. David goes to schools. Got it.
Great. I've got a few more volunteers in the chat. Thank you guys so much for your willingness to jump in and do a little bit of extra work. I know how overwhelming all this can be, but this is really exciting and a very unique opportunity. And it's to your credit that you're all willing to throw in a little extra muscle into it to try to crank out some good recommendations here. So Larry Satkowitz, we've got equity, food systems, workforce, and municipal/school infrastructure, 4 different groups. And Larry, you can feel free to volunteer for whichever one you want. And I think, Chris, we should probably try to wrap so everybody can go outside and do a few jumping jacks before house floor.
I think that's a great idea. So I just want to emphasize that this is quick. So it's not perfect. It's going to be quick to get the ball rolling. As you saw in H315, some of what we'll do is say, you know, if we made this investment in this budget, we would facilitate X and Y down the road. So we don't need endless meetings and lots of witness testimony or anything like that. I think we need just some concepts to put forward. In many cases, we'll put them forward to the committee of jurisdiction and just say, please don't forget to think about this. And I think in the meantime, for the folks that have the municipal and school working group, I think it is important for us to consider, what do we do with that? Because it's not really our budgeting, but it's more suggestions. And I think, to me, the local energy groups is the right move to work with them or inform them and try to push them a little bit. So it's quick. We need to be pulling these discussions together even over the weekend and next week, and hopefully we can begin to have some ideas that will float around. Larry, thank you. Even next week. Is that it?
Thank you all.
So Selena's going to